Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
UK expels Libyan diplomats and formally recognises rebel council. Charities slam world bodies for low aid levels in Somalia. And Palestinians face looming economic crisis as Ramadan approaches. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
British Foreign Minister William Hague said that his country is dealing with the Libyan Transitional National Council as if it was the Libyan state.
Hague announced the UK's official recognition of the council after London decided to expel the Libyan embassy staff from the UK.
Question about the recognition of countries or states or...
As for the question about the recognition of countries or states or governments, we consider this a unique situation that we have not seen before. However, in dealing with the Transitional National Council as the only official authority, we are now dealing with it as if it were the state of Libya. This is our position and our way of dealing with them. There is no essential change in our approach. The reason that we can do this now is the high level of trust which will aid in lifting the frozen Libyan assets to help Libyan students. We look at this matter from a legal standpoint and a political standpoint, and there is no dispute between them whatsoever.
The UN envoy to Libya, Abdul al-Khatib, said that the Libyan government and the Transitional National Council are still far from reaching an agreement to end the crisis in the country.
Al-Khatib said that the Libyan government informed him that it is a must to end NATO's attacks before any negotiation begins. The government also informed him that Gaddafi's leadership in the country is not negotiable in the context of finding a solution to the Libyan crisis.
The positions of Gaddafi's regime and those of the opposition's political leadership, represented by the Transitional National Council, are still far apart. The UN envoy to Libya, Abdul Ilah al-Khatib, made this statement after holding talks with both sides in Tripoli and Benghazi. Tripoli is still insisting on its position, rejecting any condition that calls for Gaddafi stepping down to settle the Libyan crisis. It also requires that NATO stop its military operations in Libya before it enters negotiations on any settlement.
The most important thing is to stop this aggression on the Libyan people in order to make decisions for a peaceful solution. Otherwise, we're wasting our time and effort, and we don't have the ability to make any decisions under any other condition.
أما بنغازي فتقول إنها لن تقبل أي مبادرة لإنهاء الصراع في ليبيا لا تتضمن.
As for Benghazi, it says that it will not accept any initiative to end the conflict in Libya that does not include Gaddafi stepping down as the very first step. As the allotted time for NATO's military intervention in Libya approaches its end, it appears that the situation will become more complicated if Gaddafi insists on his conditions for settlement. The revolutionaries, despite the progress they have achieved on the battlefronts, do not have sufficient equipment to overthrow Gaddafi anytime soon.
ميدانيا حذر حلف الناتو من أنه سيقصف أي موقع مدني صناعي.
On the ground, NATO warned that it will shell any civilian site, industrial or agricultural, that is used by Gaddafi's forces to launch military strikes. NATO warplanes bombed sites that appeared to be civilian in the city of Zliten. But a NATO spokesman says that Gaddafi's forces are using many facilities that were originally used for civilian purposes.
منشآت ذات أغراض مدنية في الأصل. On
the battlefronts, the revolutionaries are still besieging the city of Brega, but the numerous landmines planted around the city have prevented them from seizing it so far.
At least 10 people were killed and dozens injured by soldiers and members of the security forces backed by tanks in the town of Kanaker, southwest of the Syrian capital. Head of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Rami Abdul Rahman, said that security forces arrested 200 to 300 people. In this context, security forces continue to be deployed in a number of neighborhoods in the capital, including Rukn al-Din, Barza, and Al-Qadam, where heavy gunfire was heard. The opposition's websites mentioned that more tanks were sent to the town of Talbisa near Homs.
As Ramadan approaches, the Syrian authorities seem to be competing with time in an attempt to quell the protests. This is a demonstration on Midhadasha Street in central Damascus's old city on Tuesday. Syrian dissidents say that Damascus and its suburbs are the platform for a broad security operation. They reported a military operation carried out on Wednesday morning in the town of Kanaker. More than 10 civilians were killed and over 300 were arrested in the operation. Activists also spoke of raids and arrests in other regions.
There are security checkpoints and arrests have been made in the city of Zabadani. There are security checkpoints and raids have been carried out by the army in Kanaker. Since dawn, there have also been security checkpoints in the Bardia neighborhood of Damascus. There are checkpoints, raids, and tanks deployed in all Syrian cities.
Night protests occurred in a number of Syrian cities and towns. Douma, suburb of Damascus. Al-Bukamal. Deir az-Zur. Idlib. Latakia. And the countryside of Hamma. On Wednesday morning, the city of Al-Hasaka witnessed a rally in front of the judicial court. The Syrian government approved a draft law for general elections several days after passing a political party law in an attempt to affirm its seriousness about reform.
We are indeed working with the opposition, the liberals, leftists, and nationalists, and workers' unions in the country to exchange opinions and communicate so that they don't doubt these laws like the extremist groups do.
However, the opposition and its various groups assert that these measures only scratch the surface and are aimed at reducing the internal anger and foreign pressure. According to activists, the death toll of those who died under the authorities' gunfire has exceeded 1,600 people since March. Wa al-Hajar, BBC.
Yemeni Republican Guard tanks began withdrawing from the streets of Taiz, following an agreement between the joint meeting parties and the Guard's leadership in the city. Taiz has been witnessing bloody confrontations over the past few months, claiming the lives of many civilians. The agreement, which includes 10 articles, calls for ending the violence and restoring calm to the city's streets and suburbs. On the other hand, the agreement grants permission for the youths to stage peaceful sit-ins and protests. Meanwhile, the joint meeting parties have renewed their opposition to opening any dialogue with the regime before the transfer of President Ali Abdullah Saleh's authority to his deputy, Abdul Rabu Mansour Hadi. Yemen is witnessing an unprecedented humanitarian crisis due to the absence of fuel, food supplies, and essential services.
Yemenis are living amid hardship these days. The regime, which these protesters have been seeking to dismantle for months, has not yet fallen, though many believe its collapse is near. President Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime, which is clinging to power despite the massive protests against it, has further fueled the Yemeni crisis in the north and the south. For over 2 months, fuel products have disappeared from local markets, triggering prices to rise to unimaginable levels. The disappearance of oil from the market has caused food prices to rise and electricity to be cut off. This has prompted many bakeries and stores to shut down due to the absence of basic goods from the market. In addition, southern Yemen is witnessing massive security breaches. The number of displaced Yemenis who have fled the fighting between government government-backed forces and armed al-Qaeda fighters in Abyan province has reached 90,000, most of whom are women and children. Also, several areas in Aden province have witnessed acts of violence and massive rallies in protest of high prices approved by the Yemeni government.
وهدد المواطنون في عدة مدن باقتحام محطات الوقود إذا لم تتراجع.
Yemeni residents in several cities have threatened to storm gas stations if the government doesn't repeal its decision. Observers believe that the crisis, which comes amid the popular revolution, is being staged by the Yemeni regime and its U.S. and Saudi allies, who seek to impose a collective punishment on the Yemeni people in order to force them to accept the regime's political and economic policies aimed at reshaping the newly born revolution.
The
Palestinian bid for statehood was brought to a debate at a meeting of the United Nations Security Council in New York last night. Dissent and emotion marked the session, which offered a preview of expected deliberations in September. IBA's Courtney Bryant has that story.
As representatives at the UN Security Council yesterday debated the upcoming vote on Palestinian statehood, any semblance of an agreed-upon solution seemed rather remote. Palestine supporters pointed to the Arab Spring as an appropriate climate for UN representation, asserting that Palestine is ready to govern itself, and the time it has waited for legitimacy has waned too long. They also accused Israel of failing at taking responsibility for negotiations and evading international law.
As acknowledged by the international community, we have fulfilled our responsibilities and are ready to govern ourselves. The only remaining obstacle is Israel's 44-year military occupation. Our people have legitimate rights, needs, and demands. And it is our duty to listen and to act responsibly to advance their just cause. We cannot keep waiting for Israel to negotiate in good faith, an almost impossible matter, so long as the occupier continues to be absolved of its obligations under international law, and as long as might is permitted to trump right.
Israel fired back, saying the Palestinians have tried to take shortcuts to reach solutions on difficult issues. Ambassador Ron Prosor pointed to the introduction of South Sudan as the 193rd member state of the UN as a prime example of how to achieve statehood, saying that problems arising during the process were resolved through negotiation, not shortcuts.
Only this month, we were again reminded that negotiations are the route to statehood when South Sudan proclaimed its independence and was accepted as the 193rd member state of the United Nations. It marked a new chapter in a long and difficult journey. Both South and North Sudan harbored serious frustrations. Major problems arose, yet the parties did not seek quick fixes or instant solutions. They sat together, although it was hard, and negotiated, reaching a mutual agreement. This is why South Sudan was accepted by such a broad consensus in the international community. There's no coincidence that we do not hear the same resounding enthusiasm for the Palestinians' march towards unilateralism at the United Nations. On the contrary, many in the international community are looking for ways to avoid this action. Many have recognized that Palestinian attempts to create a state by bypassing negotiations are akin to picking out a chimney pot for one's house before laying its foundation.
The United States reaffirmed its vow not to support any Palestinian bid for unilateral statehood. Courtney Bryant, IBA News.
حماس اعتذرت عن تلبية دعوة لحضور اجتماع.
The Hamas movement has apologized for not accepting an invitation to attend a meeting held by the Central Council of the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO. The objective of the meeting is to seek approval for heading to the UN, as confirmed by Salim Azanoun, the head of the Palestinian National Council. Azanoun said that the head of the Palestinian Legislative Council, Aziz Dweik, said that Hamas supports going to the UN Security Council and the General Assembly to declare a Palestinian state. For his part, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said before the PLO Central Council that he is determined to head to the Security Council next September to declare a Palestinian state according to the 1967 borders. The Palestinian Authority, the PA, is bracing for a new financial crisis ahead of the holy month of Ramadan. This led to a delay in paying employees' salaries for the second consecutive month. The PA said that it plans to seek the help of Arab nations to overcome the crisis, which was first caused by the country's failure to fulfill pledges made to the Palestinians. In addition, the crisis was fueled by financial pressures mounted by Israel on the PA. From Ramallah, Sharouk Assad reports.
Ahmad, like the other 170,000 PA employees, has received only half of her salary for the month of June. She is now checking her bank account for the other half, amid concerns that her next month's salary will be delayed as well.
We have obligations and loans to pay. My salary is very important.
The delay in receiving paychecks is becoming an employee's nightmare at the end of each month. Fear is mounting, especially as the holy month of Ramadan and the beginning of the school year is approaching.
I'm afraid that I will not receive my paycheck this month. We are more worried now due to the arrival of Ramadan and the school year. It will be harder on people.
When an employee who has children gets half of his salary, it will not be enough. May God send us relief.
The situation is very difficult, and it will get worse. God willing, it will get better.
The salary crisis reflected negatively on the movement of goods in the marketplace.
When it's a salary-related crisis, everyone feels a pinch. It affects everyone. This causes price haggling. A person who usually buys milk and a cookie for his child has no choice but to only buy milk.
The PA is attributing the crisis to a deficit of $900 million this year.
Some of the donors were late in meeting their pledges at the end of last year. They failed to deliver on the promises they made during donors or Arab League meetings. The deficit is compounded.
Part of the deficit is being attributed to the delay of Arab nations in fulfilling their pledges. The other part is caused by political factors triggered by Israel and Washington and the PA's options regarding national reconciliation and its decision to head to the UN. The crisis is also generated by the Palestinian government's efforts to create a state before ending the occupation and its control of natural resources.
It's not possible to create a state before first ending the occupation and its control of Palestinian resources. The crisis reflects a political shortcoming on the PA's part.
It's a financial crisis that has recurred this month amid mounting Palestinian fears both at the public and official levels. The crisis is expected to escalate with the launch of the Palestinian diplomatic battle inside the UN's walls in September. Sharouk Assad, Dubai TV, Ramallah.
The foreign ministers of India and Pakistan spoke today of entering a new era in relations between their nations after holding their first meeting since resuming bilateral peace talks this year. The comments from Indian Foreign Minister S.M. Krishna and his Pakistani counterpart Hinda Rabbani Khar were unexpectedly positive and may be a small step towards improving regional stability, made more urgent with the U.S. troop drawdown in Afghanistan looming. Both ministers had this to say.
Diluted commitment of the two countries to fight and eliminate this scourge in all its forms and manifestations. We have also agreed on the need to strengthen cooperation on counter-terrorism to bring those responsible for terror crimes to justice. On Jammu and Kashmir, we will continue discussions with a view to finding a peaceful solution by narrowing divergences and building convergences.
I bring you commitment from President Zardari and Prime Minister Gilani, their government, and all the major and minor political streams of Pakistan to a process of engagement with India, to a process of normalization, and increasing the bilateral, cooperative, friendly ties with India as we go forward. This is indeed a new era of bilateral cooperation between the two countries, and it is our desire, and I believe after having spoken to you, Mr. Foreign Minister, that it is the desire and commitment of both the governments to make it an uninterrupted and an uninterruptible process.
Indian foreign ministers and Pakistani foreign ministers both speaking to reporters. A suicide bomber killed the mayor of Afghanistan's Kandahar city today. 65-year-old Mayor Ghulam Haider Hamidi was killed. Another person injured. Kandahar police chief said Hamidi was meeting elders from a district of Kandahar city when one of them got close to the mayor and detonated a bomb hidden in his turban. Taliban spokesman Qari Yusuf Ahmadi claimed responsibility for killing Hamidi on behalf of the group.
Starting off with news from Afghanistan, at least 3 civilians have been killed in an attack by U.S.-led foreign forces in the northeast of the country. Local authorities say the incident happened as French troops opened fire on a vehicle in Drought district of Kapisa province. A woman and a child are reportedly among the victims. So far, French troops have remained silent on the shooting, which also injured several more people. Civilians have often fallen victim to attacks by foreign forces. Our correspondent in Kabul, Faiz Khorshid, gives us more on the killings of civilians by U.S.-led NATO forces in that country.
We learned from the police chief of Kapisa province, which is almost 2 hours drive from Kabul city, saying that 3 civilians have been killed when their vehicle came under fire by the French soldiers. 4 other civilians have also been injured in this incident. These civilians were traveling from one village to another village in that province, and when the French soldiers opened fire on their vehicle, the driver has also been killed. A woman and a child are also among the dead. 4 other civilians wounded are in a critical condition. The death toll may rise because the wounded are in a serious condition. This is what the police chief of that province has reported to local media here in Kabul. The Afghan officials here are telling us that they will soon launch an investigation into these civilian deaths. Some of Afghan officials have told us that the French soldiers mistook them for the militants, and it happened under darkness. No word yet on this from NATO headquarters here in Kabul, but yes, these are the latest in a series of civilian deaths happened at the hands of foreign troops now by the French soldiers in Afghanistan.
At least 13 children have died of hunger at a refugee camp in Somalia. This as relief groups are struggling to get emergency aid to Somalia, where 10 million people are in dire need of emergency aid due to prolonged drought. Somalia is the hardest hit by the worst drought in the Horn of Africa in 60 years. It has put some 12 million people across the region in danger of starvation. The World Bank has said it will grant $500 million to farmers and those hit by the drought. However, Charities have slammed what they call low aid pledges and say not enough is being done.
The actions of the ousted Iraqi regime have led to difficult living conditions in Iraqi society, an accumulation of social problems, and a negative impact on various social strata, including women. Women are now heavily relied upon in comparison to men due to the wars and acts of terrorism witnessed in Iraq.
The major problem is the social, psychological and financial effects of having such a large percentage of widows and women living in hardship.
The conflicts in Iraq over the past decades have caused harm to Iraqi women, who account for a significant percentage of the population. About 65% of the Iraqi population is now female, a large number that worries international organizations. The reason for this is that men are targeted more frequently in these conflicts, leaving women behind in various social conditions. This means that the heaviest burden falls on elderly widows, who suffer from social, health and financial problems because of their devastating living conditions.
وصحية ومالية بسبب ظروفهن القاهرة. تقارير منظمات المجتمع المدني
Civil society organizations and the Red Cross collected significant data on Iraqi women. population. The most prominent figures are Iraq has 2 million widows, which makes up an overwhelmingly large percentage of the country's women. 17% of the women are active in the job market. 50% of them are subject to street and domestic violence. 10% of widows receive their income from social care, while 25% receive compensation for losing their husbands. The percentage of educated women is the only positive figure at 85%. They work in ministerial positions and contribute to the country's well-being. According to the reports, most of the households managed by only women are living in extreme poverty with low incomes. The average monthly income of these households is 150,000 Iraqi dinars, which is the equivalent of $100 US. Reports indicate that the problems faced by women in Iraq have had a negative impact on their health. Women's health is affected by their declining living conditions, and their ability to receive health care depends on their level of income. There are over 6,000 civil society organisations registered at the Ministry of Planning. A large portion of them work on issues regarding women and children. However, the figures and documents referenced in the report raise questions about the role of these organisations, which have not effectively helped women escape from their reality. From Baghdad, Zaid Al-Mustaf, Al-Arakia.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.